Hello, good afternoon. Today our guest is Dr. Axel Kaiser, and Dr. Kaiser will be telling us about the laissez-faire history of Chile prior to the advent of the Chicago Boys. But before we talk about Chile's history, we're going to discuss the Chicago Boys. Axel, who were the Chicago Boys?
So the Chicago Boys were a group of young Chilean economists who had been sent to the University of Chicago to study, master's degrees and PhDs in economics. And this exchange program was between the Catholic University of Santiago and the University of Chicago. And it had been created in 1955. So since then, the Catholic University started sending students to improve their knowledge in economics, at the University of Chicago. And these students came back, they were very young. And then in the 70s, in 1973, after the Salvador Allende totalitarian Marxist experiment collapsed, we had a military regime, and the military regime used these Chicago school students as advisors. And so they were in charge of, fixing the economy and introducing a free market revolution, because Chile was very much a socialist country in 1973. So the economy was run by the government. It was almost a fully centralized economy. And so the collapse of, the quality of life of people, we had hyperinflation, we had scarcity of basic goods and services. So it's very similar to the worst years of what you have seen in Venezuela in these times. And then you had, of course, terrorist groups, criminal organizations, and then in the end, the military, they staged a coup, and it was the end of the Allende regime and the attempt to consolidate a communist dictatorship in the country. And that's the origin of the Chicago Boys in terms of their fame, because they had studied at the University of Chicago with Milton Friedman, Arnold Harberger, Gary Becker, and many other very famous professors. And they came back and they made these reforms, and Chile became the most prosperous country in Latin America.
Axel, comment on the quality of these reforms. How did these reforms ameliorate living conditions in Chile?
So it was a complete overhaul of the Chilean economy. As I said, we had, for instance, we had no free trade. It had been completely excluded from the economic policy, the possibility of having a free trade with very low taxes or tariffs. We had a policy of industrial inward industrial development. It means, we had the system of import substitution. And this was not only the case in Chile, this was all over Latin America, but Chile was particularly, affected by these policies. We didn't have, respect of private property. Between Salvador Allende, the Marxist president, and the previous president, Eduardo Frei Montalva, who was a leftist, anti-capitalist, sort of social democrat, but very, very far left. He was not really a social democrat. He was more of a socialist with conservative ideas. Well, between these two, they expropriated 10 million hectares of productive land in the country, and they didn't pay anything to the owners. They also nationalized many, many companies. For instance, 100% of the mining companies were nationalized by the end of 1973, or by the end of the Allende regime, and they didn't pay compensation to the foreign firms that had, invested in these mines. So they basically stole all of this. So we had prices were fixed. We had over 3,000 prices that were fixed by the government. We didn't have free prices, so the market couldn't work. And we also, we had a huge government that had many businesses. So most of the economic activity was being directed and controlled by the government. And we had hyperinflation. So the central bank was being used to print a lot of money in order to pay for government spending. And this created, of course, hyperinflation in the end. So this is sort of the policies we had.
And these policies were reversed by the reforms of the Chicago Boys.
Yes, they were completely reversed by the reforms of the Chicago Boys. We finally had an independent central bank. We brought down inflation. It was hard to achieve. We did it. We created a new constitution that strictly respected the rule of law and private property. Some of the companies and lands that had been expropriated or confiscated by the previous governments were given back by the owners, not all of them, but some. And they, set the prices free. So you had free prices. They could achieve to control government spending. And so we didn't have as high deficits as we used to have. This took a long time. I mean, a couple of years. It wasn't like overnight. We also opened up to free trade over the years. So yeah, I mean, I would say it was a complete transformation. There was a free market revolution, and it transformed the country.
Today in Chile, are free market policies being reversed?
Yes, we are experiencing a backlash. We have been, experiencing and having the left and the far left arguing against what they call the neoliberal model. And, between 2014 and 2018, in the second government of Michelle Bachelet, who is a socialist, she introduced several reforms that created, big government and higher taxes and more stricter regulations and decreased economic freedom. And now we have President Boric, who is a 35-year-old, extremely far left president, and his group, he's governing with the Communist Party. And we also have a constitutional assembly that's proposing a new constitution that is very similar in many respects to the constitution of Bolivia and Ecuador and Venezuela. So they have declared it openly, they want to put an end to what they call neoliberalism. So it's basically to put an end to free markets in Chile. So what do they want to do? They want to have a government that intervenes in everything and that controls businesses. They want to get rid of the private capitalization accounts system that we have for the pensions. They want to, get rid of the of school choice and the voucher system, and they want to dramatically increase taxation and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there is a war against the free market model in Chile, and this war started some years ago. It's not new, but it's now reaching a new level, and it's being very intense. And if this new constitution is approved in September, we are going to have a referendum in order to decide if it's approved or not. Then I think it will be the absolute end of Chile's free market. We will be, I think, economically closer to Argentina in the medium term than what we used to be. So yeah, I mean, there is open war against the free market institutions.
But it's quite obvious that these reforms are going to be antithetical to the goal of the left, and this goal is to reduce income inequality. The prominent economist, now retired Jeffrey Williams, in many of his articles and books, he notes that Latin America missed the great leveling. When other countries promoted free trade and free markets, protectionism was still the norm in Latin America, and protectionism led to rent seeking, and rent seeking created an environment that was conducive to inequality. So based on what you're saying, it seems that the government of Chile wants to go back to an era where income inequality was more problematic, because free markets increase incomes and by extension lower inequality.
Yes, and this is exactly what has happened in Chile over the last decades, that, inequality of income has come down substantially. But I don't think the left really cares about that. They say they want to, create a more equal society and bring about prosperity for the poor and these things, but they have never achieved that, and they don't care. Chavez used to say that, Maduro says that, Castro says that. The communists everywhere in the world have said the same thing. They want freedom, they want democracy, they want prosperity. And what do they deliver? They deliver tyranny, they deliver genocide, they deliver hunger, starvation, and things like that. So I believe that what they really are after is power. They want power, and they want to concentrate power in their hands. And they are ideologues who do not care about the sufferings of regular people. It is completely irrelevant to them, because if it was relevant to them, they would study a little bit what institutions are really responsible for alleviating, the suffering of these people. So I don't think they really are worried about increasing inequality in the country. They don't care at all that inequality is going to increase, and that poverty is going to increase, and that crime is increasing rapidly. That's for them. I don't think that's a problem. As long as they can have a grab on power, they are safe, and they have their privileges, and they have their high salaries, and they can live, out of the rest of us by controlling the state. I don't think they really are worried about anything else.
What is the right in Chile doing to combat this hysteria?
Well, the right is center right and right, who are groups that are not really performing very well in the public debate and political terms, but they are trying to win the referendum. They are doing campaign and explaining to people that if this new constitution it's approved, and the economy of the country will be ruined, and probably democracy is going to be under threat, because there are many norms in this new constitution that also will make it much easier for them to create a leftist authoritarian regime in the country. So they are doing whatever they can in order to wake people up to the fact that everything is it's at stake with this new constitution, and we will see if it's enough. But the right has been very, naive, and to some extent also coward in the last years. And people like myself, we were warning that this was going to happen, and we were also disregarded by people on the right, because they never imagined that that this situation could get as bad as it is right now. They could have, it was beyond their capacity to comprehend that the left really wanted to create a populist authoritarian regime in the country, and they were naive and stupid.
Yes, if people are being silly, don't be afraid to call them stupid. If you're an unserious person, then you're just stupid. End of story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Axel, are you based in Chile or the United States?
I am really spending most of my time not in Chile, but in different countries, the United States, other Latin American countries where I have to go for work, and in Europe. But I'm moving out of Chile. I'm based here now still, but now I'm doing, the legal, process in order to be able to move somewhere else, and probably the United States, if not Europe. So I'll be gone by next year.
Great. And are you active in the think tank community?
I'm very active in the think tank community. I'm a senior fellow at the Atlas Center for Latin America. I'm the president of the Foundation for Progress here in Chile, which is the most impactful free market think tank in the country, and one of the leading think tanks in Latin America. And so I am a think tank man. I'm I funded this, I created this think tank, and I'm the president of the board right now, and I'm a public intellectual. I go a lot on television, on newspapers everywhere, not only here but also in different countries, Latin America, and also in Spain, and sometimes even the US. So yeah, I mean, I'm fully immersed in this think tank community.
Research institutions are crucial to promote development in countries like Chile. So I live in Jamaica, and some years ago, a foreign academic started a research organization, and that organization penned some really intriguing papers on technology policy and tax policy. But today, there seems to be an obsession with gender issues and welfare. So I no longer take that institution seriously. I actually unsubscribe from the institution on my mailing list.
Yes, there is a lot of cultural infection with these identitarian issues, which are, in my opinion, a threat to society based on liberty and rule of law, and ideas of excellence and beauty. So this is, yeah, it's happening everywhere. It's the woke culture, and it's infecting even some libertarian people and institutions, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately, indeed. And another major problem actually is that institutions like the World Bank and the IDB, they have been infected. So we can no longer rely on these organizations to actually compel leaders in the developing world to implement quality free market programs. So officials from the World Bank in Jamaica will talk about deregulation. Recently, an official from the World Bank in Jamaica was talking about deregulation. I saw the headline, I didn't read the article, but price controls are still a problem. There are institutions that are literally determining the quality of imports and the contents, and I don't hear much people in Jamaica talking about these issues. But I can tell you this: multilateral organizations are always quick to talk about gender issues and the LGBT lobby.
Yes, it has become a cult. Yeah, it's no, it's a religion, and it has spread all over these institutions everywhere, because all of these institutions, these people, they belong to elites, and it's part of being, an elitist person or someone who uh, claims to be better than the rest, is to have these beliefs, luxury beliefs. So
Yes.
you don't really care about poor people in Jamaica or poor people in Africa. You don't really care about that. You start speaking about gender issues and trans people and things that are only relevant in, developed countries, not relevant in the sense that they don't really have any, bearing in changing how people live, but are relevant in the sense that people care about this stuff in rich countries because we can afford to invest and or waste a lot of resources and time on these stupid issues. But
Yes.
then you have
Frivolous.
yeah, then you have, for example, crime. You also have that in the West. In the United States, many cities are completely plagued by crime. Then you have problems in Black communities that have to do with, the lack of fathers raising their sons, that they have to do with the collapse of the traditional family. They have to do with lack of discipline, values, and norms that will help them achieve better results at school and university. They have to do with welfare programs that condemn them to a life of dependency. And all of these things are not addressed because they prefer to fund Black Lives Matter, which is you know,
A terrorist group. It's under investigation for impropriety, and some members have actually exposed violence. So I'm going to call it what it is.
yeah. Many of them are very violent, and it's a far left, organization which promotes hatred violence, and it's very corrupt. I mean, some of them we know they have bought, houses. Some of the founders in California, many houses, spending the money that they get. So it's a way of getting a lot of money, becoming very rich by exploiting the guilt of white elites. And for these white elites, businesses and others, this funding Black Lives Matters is a way of, presenting themselves as if they were morally pure and superior to the rest. Is a test of purity, of moral purity. So yeah, I mean, this is insane what's going on, and I'm very happy that Black Lives Matter is losing
Traction, yes.
traction and reputation. Yeah.
As one academic, Paul Gottfried, frequently notes, the cultural war is really a battle between white people who defend the West and white people who are contemptuous of the West. Non-white people are really the tools. So blacks who are involved in the cultural wars are merely the tool.
Absolutely, I agree with that. This is a war between white people. It's the white people who want to destroy the West because they hate the West, and they make a fortune and a business out of attacking the West. They're full of resentment and sometimes often inferiority complexes for several reasons, and some of them, they promote these ideas only because it makes them look good for virtue signaling reasons. And then you have others like myself who are defending the institutions of Western civilization and values and history, our thinkers, and our democracy and rationality, who don't want to see our civilization collapse.
Not at all. Western civilization is worthy of defense. Ideas like communism and socialism are not new, but the systematic development of these ideas occurred in the West. Adam Smith, Thomas Mann, all of these people, they wrote the treatise on economics. And you have to just praise the West for producing a high level of systematic thought.
Yeah, and we produced freedom. This is the only or the first civilization that produced freedom, individual liberty, rule of law. We produced the idea of human rights. We produced modern science. We produced Paris and Vienna and all of these beautiful cities, and we produced Beethoven and Shakespeare and Goethe and Einstein and all of these geniuses, and that has not been the case with other civilizations. I mean, there are other places in Asia where you have also geniuses, but not at the scale in such large numbers, and as you find in the West. And so we are we have many reasons to be proud and happy about what we have achieved. And all the sins that you can find in the Western civilization, in fact, Western civilization, you can find it in any other civilization. The difference is we have developed a higher consciousness to some extent that makes us, realize that things like slavery were wrong, and that's why we put an end to it. But it was the West that ended slavery. It was not any other part of the world, and it was practiced everywhere. So, yeah, I mean, people don't want to realize that there is no alternative to Western civilization. There is no alternative to our way of, reasoning. If you want to preserve freedom and dignity, or you can go live in Russia or in China. I mean, what do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Yes,
I mean,
Axel.
what's the alternative?
The West is so racist and problematic, but people keep migrating to Western countries. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, because we offer more prosperity and we offer freedom. That's the reason. And this has been the achievement mainly of Western thinkers. Most of them were white men, but that is the truth. That is the truth. So that doesn't make any difference. I mean, if it were white males or white females, or doesn't make any difference. The thing is that we have this civilization that we created that achieved wonderful things and that set the human spirit free to create from, you know, art, science, and all of this cultural innovation.
So I live in a country that's a part of the political West, but it's not a part of the cultural and intellectual West. And I've always admired intellectual debates in Western societies. So in all societies, it is normal for traditionalists and modern people to clash, but only in the West did the moderns win. So America is a bigger country. The larger the country, the higher the likelihood of innovation. But what I also like about America and other Western countries is intellectual diversity. Jamaica is a small country with two major newspapers, and most of the columnists are basically uttering the same stale points. If you're in America, if you don't like the Wall Street Journal, you can read Claremont, the Claremont Institute, or National Review, or the New Republic. American Western countries give us choices.
Yes. The United States has many choices, many options. And that's something I like about the US, because you have people, you know, motivated and who are willing to give a fight to defend their country. And this is something you don't find in the same proportion or the same scale in Europe, not even in the UK. This is very particular to the United States.
Yes, the most individualistic country in the West. Remember, the United States was settled by people who were higher in restaurants and individualism. They wanted to flee terror abroad.
Absolutely. They were, you know, looking for freedom and a place to create a new home, a new life. And that's the reason, I think, why the United States has this spirit even now. I mean, they're losing it, but there are people fighting to preserve it. And if they eventually kill this spirit of, you know, freedom, individual liberty, and having, you know, a dream that you can pursue, the American dream, pursuit of happiness, if they lose that, then the US is going to die as a cultural entity and as a power, you know, in the world, as a important engine of prosperity and cultural innovation and scientific progress. If they lose that spirit, the founding spirit of the United States, that's all gone.
Now, Axel, we can talk about the most pressing issue in our discourse, the origins of classical liberalism in Chile. Who was the founder of classical liberalism in Chile?
So it's very hard to say there was a founder, but you can trace this back to the 18th century. In the early, 19th century, you had people reading Jean-Baptiste Say, for example, the French economist. And this was a book, economists, I mean, this Say's book on economics was the main document that the elites were reading in the country. But mostly they were influenced by Spanish thinkers who were not really classical liberals. They were in favor of state interventionists. But the first, you know, signs of classical liberal trend developing, you know, you can, in the early 19th century, maybe the 1820s, 1830s, you already can see, or maybe before that, even 1812, 1815, you can already see students at school and others reading at the faculties of law, because there were no, of course, economic departments. They were reading Jean-Baptiste Say. So, and then I think huge influence, the most influential thinker in the history of Chile, and of course, one of the brightest minds in the history of Latin America, maybe the brightest intellectual in the history of Latin America, was Andrés Bello. Andrés Bello had emigrated from Venezuela, and he came to the country, and also in the mid 18th century, and he was a classical liberal. He created the first civil code in our country, and this civil code served as a role model for all civil codes in Latin America. This guy was a genius. He wrote about poetry, about grammatic. He wrote about aesthetics, philosophy, and he was a follower of Adam Smith and also the Scottish Enlightenment. And the system of law that he created was very pro-market, very pro-market.
Axel, but you're missing out somebody who is equally important. That brilliant thinker, Jean, was responsible for free banking legislation.
I was Jean-Gustave Corcelles and Will, that was a French economist who arrived in Chile in 1855, and he became a good friend of Andrés Bello, and he became the first professional economics professor in the country. He was a celebrity. He was a famous French economist, and he was a laissez-faire economist. And he was an advisor to the government, and he taught economics at the University of Chile, which is the oldest university in the country, or one of the oldest universities. And he had a lot of influence on the politicians at the time, and he created a system of free banking in Chile that was very successful, actually, very successful. He had lots of disciples that followed his teachings, because he then left Chile. He went back to France. He spent many years here, but then he left. And these disciples, they spread the ideas of Corcelles and Will, which is really fascinating to read. It's very simple to understand, but he was a brilliant mind, and he had business experience also. Anyways, he had this influence, and Chile was a very, relatively free economy, or I would say very free economy under his influence until the early 20th century. For 50 years, Corcelles and Will's ideas were the main force behind economic policy in our country, and Chile experienced a process of progress that was extraordinary. So he was like a Milton Friedman of the time, Corcelles and Will, and we owe to him that Chile became the 16th nation with the highest per capita income in the world, to him and to his followers, because he promoted a small government, a free banking system, and private property, of course, and free trade and things like that. So he's a crucial figure in Chile's economic history. And it's really interesting that someone who was so important in France came to Chile and spent years here advising the government and teaching economics. And, he's even cited by Karl Marx in the book Capital, Das Kapital. So he's a figure, a thinker with a lot of, importance. He's not just minor personality. He was very, very, very relevant during his time.
And he was also critical of the concept of a state. The state is not registered anywhere. And Jean was one of those people who argued that individuals exist and individuals create institutions. The state was merely an abstraction.
Yes, he said that. And he was very much against these philosophies that idealized the state, socialism, Hegelianism, all of these things. He understood that the state was, a group of people, real people, not some entity from which you could expect everything. And he was warning all the time against the perils of government power and state power. So he was promoting free markets, and of course, he was also classical liberal in terms of politics. He believed in the republic and limited government and freedom of speech and democracy. So, yeah, he was very much person in favor of freedom, and he didn't believe in redistribution. He said that all of redistribution, is unfair, and the government should not tax some to give money to others.
Exactly. Now, Axel, we have been speaking for around 40 minutes, and speaking to you has been a pleasure, but unfortunately I have to wrap up. But thanks for your time.
No, thank you very much.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.